Welcome to Payback with Silas. Every day, a new story, lies, betrayal, payback. Let's begin.
I stood up to toast the love of my life. And by the time I sat down, I realized two people I trusted most had been lying to me for 7 years. One of them might be the real father of the boy I've raised like my own. I never liked rehearsal dinners. Something about the fake pageantry, the stage toasts, the unspoken tension of family dynamics. It always felt performative. But this one? This was ours. And for a few shining hours, it actually felt like something real. We held it in a quiet private room above the Rusted Bell, an old converted distillery near Asheville, North Carolina. Wood beams, string lights, craft cocktails. It was exactly the kind of offbeat romantic vibe that Emmeline loved. And I loved her, so I made it happen. Every inch of that evening was for her. Emmeline. God, even her name sounds like poetry. She came into my life 5 years ago with a messy past, a smile that disarmed me, and a little boy named Micah, who clung to her legs like a shadow. I never asked too many questions. She told me Micah's father had been young, immature, scared, and had bailed before the baby was born. That was it. End of story. And I accepted it. Because from the moment I met that kid, I loved him. I wasn't replacing anyone. I was stepping into shoes that had never been filled. I taught him how to ride a bike. I bandaged his knees. I sang him to sleep during thunderstorms. He called me Dad before I even proposed. I never doubted her. Not once. That night, everyone I loved sat in one place. My mother, my sister Lydia, my college buddies, my groomsmen, including Orrin Reeve. My best friend since we were 14. The kind of guy who could crash your car and make you apologize for not reminding him where reverse was. A walking contradiction, selfish, magnetic, brilliant, and impossible not to love. We drifted a little over the past year, but I chalked that up to life. He was traveling constantly, managing musicians, burning out fast. I hadn't asked him to be my best man. Something in me hesitated. Instead, I asked my brother-in-law. Orrin didn't protest. But I noticed the look in his eyes. That flicker. He hit it fast. The toast started. My sister told an embarrassing story about my first date with Emmeline. Her cousin cried talking about how Micah had changed Emmeline's life. Her college roommate got too drunk. And then, unexpectedly, Orrin stood. He didn't tell me he'd prepared anything. His glass was still half full. He tapped it with a fork and everyone turned to face him. I wish I could remember the first words he said. But all I remember is the silence that settled over the room once he paused. The kind of silence where everyone leans forward, not to hear better, but because they feel something is wrong. And then he said it. There's something I've been carrying for a long time. And if I don't say it now, I'll never forgive myself. I watched Emmeline stiffen. 7 years ago, Em and I, we weren't strangers. No. Not here. Not now. It was one night. A long time ago. Right before she got pregnant. I thought it meant nothing. She told me it meant nothing. I tried to believe that. I tried to forget. But then I saw Micah. He looked at me. And I knew. He has my eyes. My exact eyes, Lucas. I didn't speak. Couldn't. Last month, I took a private paternity test. It was tearing me apart. I had to know. I didn't expect the result. But I'm not gonna lie to you, not anymore. Not before you marry her. He raised a trembling hand and said it. Micah is my son. I didn't move. Not when Orrin said it. Not when Emmeline gasped. Not when my sister whispered my name like it was a question. I just sat there, holding a champagne flute in my hand like it still had a purpose. You ever hear someone say their life flashed before their eyes? That's not how it felt. Mine paused, frame by frame, like a film reel melting in slow motion. Every memory, every laugh, every bedtime story, every birthday cake I ever made for Micah, suddenly under question. What if I wasn't his dad? What if I never was? My throat was dry, but my hands were soaked in sweat. My suit collar suddenly felt 2 sizes too small. Oren was still standing, waiting, like some twisted confessor at a wedding rehearsal turned trial. Emmeline stood slowly. Her face was pale, lips parted, and I could tell she hadn't known. Or at least, she hadn't believed it was possible. That didn't make it hurt less. Lucas! I swear to God I didn't know. The room was still. You could hear the soft hum of the exposed light bulbs hanging above us. A fork clinked. Somewhere in the distance, a car alarm went off, then stopped. I finally stood. Pushed the chair back so hard it scraped the floor and startled a few guests. I looked at her. Really looked. The woman I was going to marry tomorrow. The woman who trusted me with her son. The woman who gave me hope after a decade of disappointment and emotional dead ends. And now I wasn't sure if any of it was real. Not because she lied, she didn't. Not directly. But how the hell could she not know? You told me his dad ran off, I said, voice lower than I meant. You told me he didn't want anything to do with Micah. She nodded, tears forming. Because that's what I believed. I never, Oren and I, it was one time, Lucas. One night. Years before you and I ever. I raised a hand. Stop. Please. Just stop. She shut her mouth. I turned to Oren. He had the decency to look ashamed. But only just. Why now? I asked. Why tonight? Because if I didn't, I'd have to stand next to you tomorrow, pretending. Pretending that kid isn't mine. Pretending I'm okay with you marrying her while I know my son is calling someone else dad. He paused. And because I wasn't sure until the test. I wanted to punch him. Not for the one night. Not for the test. Not even for the timing. I wanted to punch him because he still looked like my best friend. And I couldn't understand how someone who meant that much to me could hurt me this deeply. I looked around. Half the guests were avoiding eye contact. Some looked heartbroken. Others looked entertained. Like we were some reality show twist they hadn't seen coming. I couldn't breathe in that room. My legs were moving before my brain caught up. I walked straight out of the Rusted Bell, down the narrow stairwell, and into the thick North Carolina summer night. The air smelled like rain and old wood. The sounds of laughter and clinking glasses faded behind me as the door swung shut. I kept walking until I reached the parking lot, leaned against my car, and tried not to throw up. I had 24 hours until my wedding. And I didn't know if I was still getting married. I don't remember driving home. I remember turning the key. I remember the hum of the engine, the glow of the dashboard, and the way my hands shook so badly I almost sideswiped a guardrail on Route 74. But the in-between? A blur. My body was moving. My mind was somewhere else. I pulled into the driveway of the little house Emmeline and I had rented together a year ago. It was supposed to be temporary, a soft landing until we bought something permanent. Something with a yard for Micah and maybe even a dog someday. Now it looked like someone else's home. Like I'd stumbled into a stranger's life. Inside it was quiet. I sat in the dark. Didn't turn on the lights. Didn't check my phone. Just sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on my knees, and tried to make sense of who the hell I even was anymore. What made someone a father? Was it DNA? A bloodline? A jawline? Or was it 2 a.m. fevers and math homework and teaching him how to tie a tie? If you asked me yesterday, I would have answered without blinking, I'm Micah's father. I love him. He loves me. That's what matters. But now I wasn't sure I had the right. I must have fallen asleep on the couch, because when I opened my eyes, it was morning, and the world hadn't stopped spinning, even if mine had. My phone had 14 missed calls. 3 from my mom. 2 from Lydia. 7 from Emmeline. 1 from an unknown number I somehow knew was Oren. And 1 from Micah's school. Just a standard reminder about the summer book fair. A perfectly normal thing in a world that suddenly wasn't. I stared at that message for a long time. He didn't know. Micah didn't know anything. He was probably brushing his teeth, humming some stupid song about sharks and breakfast, waiting for me to take him to the store like I promised. What was I supposed to say to him? Hey buddy, remember how I said I'd always be your dad? Well, plot twist, there's a guy you've never called anything but Uncle Orrin, and it turns out he's your biological father. Cool, huh? No. I couldn't do it. Not yet. Not until I figured out what I believed. That afternoon I drove. Not to work. Not to the venue. Just away. Somewhere between Hendersonville and the edge of Pisgah Forest, I pulled over at a quiet overlook I used to go to in college when everything felt like too much. And that's when I remembered something. Something so small I had forgotten it even happened. It was last year. Micah had just turned 6. I had taken him to a father-son hike hosted by a local nonprofit. There were fire pits, storytelling, rope bridges. A whole weekend of bonding. At the end, the kids were asked to draw a picture of their dad. Micah's drawing was messy, full of stick figures and weird angles, but unmistakably me, tall, glasses, beard. Next to it, in crooked letters, he'd written, "This is my dad. He makes me pancakes and makes the monsters go away." I sat there holding that memory like it was a physical thing. Like it could anchor me before I drifted off into something I couldn't come back from. Blood or no blood, Orrin hadn't made the monsters go away. I did. I still didn't know if I could marry Emmeline tomorrow. I didn't know if I could look Orrin in the eye without breaking something. But I knew one thing. I wasn't walking away from Micah. Not now. Not ever. I texted her. Just 5 words. "We need to talk. Alone." She replied almost instantly. "Come to the park. The one with the bridge." That meant Westfield Grove, near the edge of town. A quiet little patch of green with a wooden footbridge over a creek that barely trickled in summer. It's where I first told her I loved her. Where Micah learned to ride his bike. Where we used to go when things got too loud inside. When I got there, she was already sitting on the bench by the bridge, hands in her lap, hair pulled back tight like she was bracing for impact. She didn't look up when I approached. I sat beside her, close but not touching. For a while neither of us spoke. Then, quietly, she said, "You should hate me." I took a breath. Let it out slowly. "I don't. But I don't know what to feel yet." She nodded like she expected that. Maybe even hoped for it. There was something raw in her face. Not just guilt. Something deeper. Older. "It wasn't a lie," she said. "What I told you about Micah's dad. The one I thought was his dad, I meant it. But you slept with Orrin." She flinched. "Once. It wasn't supposed to happen. It was after a bad breakup. I just found out the other guy, Gavin, had cheated on me. Orrin was there. I was drunk. Angry. Sad. He was. Orrin." I laughed bitterly. "Yeah. That's how it usually happens with him." She kept talking, her voice thin. "I didn't even think it was his. The timing didn't make sense. I was with Gavin for almost a year. I figured the one night with Orrin was a blip. I told Gavin I was pregnant. He ghosted me. Never returned my calls. Didn't ask for proof. And you never wondered?" She looked at me then. And God, her eyes. I'd never seen them like that. Of course I did. Every time Micah smiled a certain way, every time I saw that little dimple that Gavin never had. But I was terrified. What was I supposed to do, Lucas? Call Orrin and say, "Hey, remember that mistake we made? Surprise! You might be the dad?" "Yes," I said. "That's exactly what you should have done." She nodded. Not defensively. Just accepting. Then, very softly, she reached into her bag and pulled out something. A folded piece of paper. Old, creased at the edges. "I almost did," she said. "A few years ago. I wrote this. I even put a stamp on it." I opened it. It was a letter. Handwritten. To Orrin. "I don't know if this matters to you. I don't even know if you'll care. But I think Micah might be yours. I just needed you to know. The letter never got sent. I stared at it like it was radioactive. Why didn't you mail it? She looked down at her hands. Because by then, Micah called you Daddy. You were reading him bedtime stories, showing up at school events. What if I opened a door that made everything worse? So you stayed quiet. I chose you, she said. Every single time. I didn't know what to say. There was no villain here. Just fear. Just silence. Just humans. I stood, needing to breathe. She stood too. I love you, she said, voice barely audible. But if you walk away, I'll understand. Just promise me one thing. What? She looked at me. Not pleading. Not performing. Just asking. Promise me you'll still be his dad. My chest cracked open. Because that was the only thing I was still sure of. Always. I woke up on the floor. Not by accident. I couldn't stand the bed that night. Too full of memories. Too warm with ghosts. So I pulled off a pillow and a blanket, lay on the hardwood floor of what should have been our bedroom, and waited for the sun to come through the blinds like judgment. It was the day of our wedding. And I wasn't putting on a suit. There were no caterers. No string quartet. No vows scribbled on a napkin. No aisle waiting for me. No guests. At 9:17 a.m., I texted Emmeline. Don't come to the venue. I won't be there. She didn't respond. I didn't expect her to. At 10:05, I picked up Micah from my sister's house. He ran down the front steps in his dinosaur hoodie, cheeks red from sleep and cereal. He didn't know anything had changed. That made one of us. He jumped into my arms like always and said, Are we still doing pancakes today? I smiled. We're absolutely doing pancakes. We drove to our favorite spot, Honey Tree Cafe. The same booth in the corner. The same crayon packet Micah always chewed through without drawing a single thing. Halfway through his chocolate chip stack, he looked up and said, Why do people say real dad? Like at school. Some kids ask me if you're my real dad. I froze. My fork hovered over the plate. What did you tell them? I asked. He shrugged. I said, he's my dad, that's real enough. And just like that, my eyes burned hotter than the coffee in my cup. You mean it? I asked. He nodded. You taught me to swim. You fixed my robot when its leg fell off. You yell at the TV when football's on. That's what dads do. I didn't tell him anything about Oren. Not yet. Not today. Maybe not for a long time. That conversation will come when it's right. When he's ready. But one thing was clear. Biology doesn't build love. Time does. Presence does. Choice does. At 1:20 p.m., I finally answered Oren's call. I didn't yell. I didn't ask questions. I just said, Micah is not a prize. He's not a paternity test. He's a kid. If you want to be in his life, we'll talk. But I'm not stepping aside. I raised him. He's my son too. You'll respect that. He didn't argue. For once in his life, Oren had nothing to say. And maybe that was the beginning of something better. Or maybe it was the end of everything we were. Either way, I hung up without waiting. The wedding didn't happen that day. Not the way we'd planned. But something else did. That evening, Micah and I went back to the bridge. The same one where I first said, I love you, to his mother. The same one where she told me the truth. He stood beside me, skipping rocks into the creek. Emmeline joined us just before sunset. She didn't say much. Neither did I. But Micah grabbed both our hands without asking, and we just stood there in the amber light, quietly tethered to something broken but not lost. We didn't speak of wedding dresses or flowers. But we spoke of pancakes. And school. And his latest obsession, volcanoes. And I realized. Some vows don't need ceremonies. Some families don't need perfection. They just need staying power. And that? That I had plenty of.